Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk-a-walk. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Daniel Starkand. We're talking Trey Turner. Some, I wouldn't say news, but an interesting article comes out about him in the OC Register last week, Daniel, that I think just brings up a lot of the speculation and a lot of the questions Dodger fans are asking about Trey Turner and his future. So let me run you through a few of the quotes that appeared in the article. You can give me your reaction, and then we can talk about should the Dodgers be actively pursuing Trey Turner moving forward. Here was the first quote, yeah, I'm from the East Coast. Would I like to go back? Sure. But I think LA's been really good to me. This is part of a narrative that he's an East Coast guy. He doesn't want to be here. He continued along those lines. Everything here has been really good. It's definitely not a I don't want to be on the West Coast thing. And then the final one, he said, I'm sure we'll be talking in a few weeks, talking about how the Dodgers, they'd had some negotiations before the season. They couldn't come to an agreement. They decided not to discuss it during the season, but I think some sort of good news that he's saying, hey, I'm sure we're going to be talking. There's interest. So before we get into Trey Turner, the player, his need, the payroll, all of that, what did you make of this story and the quotes from Trey?
What I made of it, honestly, was probably like that he got coached up pretty well by his agent on what to say when he's asked these type of questions. Like, it seems like he basically is just not ruling anything out. Like he said, like, am I from the East Coast? Would I love to go back? Sure. But I've also enjoyed my time here in LA and would love to stay. So it seems like he's not really, tipping his hand one way or the other. And why should he? I mean, he's still got 2 months till he's going to be a free agent. But it feels like this is heading towards a bidding war that I'm not sure if the Dodgers are going to be the top bidder, which is what it may take to land Trey Turner in the offseason.
One other piece that I didn't mention from that story I thought was important was this whole narrative of him being an East Coast guy. And he basically said, yeah, I kind of am responsible for that. I put that out there. But when he explained it, I think it would be good news for Dodger fans. He basically said, look, I was trying to posture to get traded to the East Coast because that was the place I knew. Like, if I knew someone was going to offer me an extension, I wasn't going to want to have to make a decision on that extension without knowing the place. And so he was trying to say, hey, I'd love to stay on the East Coast. Basically trade me to an East Coast team. He gets traded to the Dodgers and essentially says, hey, I've loved my time here. And as you said, he's making the smart move about leaving his options open. So let's talk about those options. As you said, there's going to be a bidding war. Where do the Dodgers stand financially? 2023, their payroll, they've got about $106 million coming off of the books, plus $35.3 million of Trevor Bauers if he remains suspended. That's another $35.3 coming off. Then you've got Justin Turner on a club option that's included in the existing payroll. So when I say $106 million coming off, all of the club options I'm about to mention are included in the number of, like, these guys as if they were to re-sign, as if the Dodgers were to pick it back up. So you've got Justin Turner, a $16 million club option, Daniel Hudson, $6.5 million, Duffy, $7 million, Alberto, $2 million, and Nelson, $1.1 million. So basically, realistically, you've got Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Chris Taylor, Max Muncy, Blake Trinan, Austin Barnes. That group have salaries totaling $93 million next year. Add in Justin Turner at $16 million, which I think is the most realistic of that group. That's a $109 million payroll. For context, this year their payroll is $265 million. So that's a $156 million drop. Free agents, Trey Turner, Clayton Kershaw, Craig Kimbrell, Joey Gallo, Andrew Heaney, Tyler Anderson, Tommy Kahnle, Chris Martin. Plus, not included in those numbers, arbitration guys like Bellinger, Urias, Buehler, May, Smith, Ferguson, Gonsolin, Gratterall, Almonte, and Trace Thompson, are all arbitration guys. The point of all that, Daniel, is they have the money if they need to because of the David Prices and those types coming off of the books. Let me give you a couple more data points and then we can discuss. Trey Turner, how good has he been this year? He's currently 10th in Major League Baseball in wins above replacement. He's 9th in batting average, 2nd in hits. Has been healthy, has not missed any games due to injury this year. He's 4th in stolen bases. He has 20 home runs. He's 7th in RBIs. On the flip side, his on-base percentage, 31st in baseball, slugging percentage, 19th. So good but not great. StatCast, solid. hard hit percentage, expected batting average, strikeout rate well above average, walk rate, whiff rate, chase rate below average, everything else kind of in the middle. So that's the second data point. He's been incredibly good this year. And the third one is he's not the only shortstop that's going to be hitting the market. Dansby Swanson is going to be a free agent. He ranks just ahead of Trey Turner in wins above replacement this year. And then right above Swanson, you've got Xander Bogaerts, who can opt out of his contract. Everybody's expecting that. And then obviously, finally, Carlos Correa expected to opt out as well. So you've got 4 incredibly good shortstops all hitting the market. According to WAR, Trey Turner is the 3rd best this season, and Carlos Correa is number 4 on that list. So lots of competition. So they've got the money. He's been very good. There will be other guys on the market. What do you make of those data points, Daniel?
I mean, I think the money thing is the most important, obviously, because if you're going to re-sign Trey Turner, it's going to take a lot of money. And I think you broke it down. The Dodgers are in a very good spot financially moving forward. Now, I do think they have other needs to address.
Yeah.
The starting rotation, is definitely going to be one of them. You look at Walker Buehler is going to be out all of next year. Clayton Kershaw, Andrew Heaney, Tyler Anderson are all free agents. So that's going to be something they're going to have to address. They usually address the bullpen as well, but that's not nearly as much money as a big time starter or Trey Turner. So I definitely think there is going to be money if the Dodgers want to sign him. I think his play has warranted it. Like, we've watched him every day. You said the numbers. He's been really, really good, and he's right in the middle of the prime of his career. So even if you are signing him to that long-term deal, I think the questions are fair. There's a lot of people questioning how he's going to age. I think you look at a speed guy, typically doesn't age the best, but he's also got a really good hit tool. So I think if you were to give him out that long-term deal, I don't think you're going to necessarily regret it. Like, there may be a couple rough years on the back end. But if you look at the Dodgers' current roster and the state of the organization, they're obviously in win now mode. So if you get 3 or 4 good years out of Trey Turner, and you win a couple World Series in there, it's worth it, on the back end. I guess the only question mark, or the only thing where it's like, are we willing to give Trey Turner this much money, which it's going to be a lot of money, probably upwards of $300 over 8 years, somewhere in that
$300 million.
Yeah. Sorry, $300. That's gonna be beer prices if they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Turner at Dodger Stadium. But I think the one question is, and it doesn't even have to do with the Dodgers, but it's what are the Angels gonna do with Ohtani? Like, we know they're potentially selling the team. Does that mean they're gonna trade Ohtani? Does that mean they're gonna extend him? Does that mean they're gonna let him play out the final year of his deal? Because if they're trading Ohtani, I would expect the Dodgers to very much be in the mix of that. We know the Dodgers have been enamored with Ohtani for years now, as they should. Like, who isn't? So if there's trade talks there, I would expect the Dodgers to be in the mix. And if you could only give the long-term big money deal to one of those guys, I would take Ohtani. So I think that should all kind of get sorted out around the same time. Like, I think, by the offseason, the Angels will have at least an idea of who they're selling to, if they're going to keep Ohtani. And if, who knows, if they sign him to some sort of extension, that kind of makes the picture a little clearer for the Dodgers. But as far as the other shortstops you named, I think they're all good. I think Correa is obviously a non-starter. I feel like we talked about that last offseason a lot. Those other guys are good options as well, but me personally, I would prefer to just stick with the guy you got. I think Trey, even though he's behind Bogaerts and Dansby Swanson in WAR, I think he's a more dynamic player than those guys. I think those guys don't affect games on the base pass. I think those guys are probably better defensively, which affects the WAR numbers.
Yeah.
But I'd prefer Trey Turner over those guys, even if it's, paying a little more money. I would expect Trey probably to get the most out of those guys.
Has Trey been good enough defensively? You mentioned it. I mean, that was one of the big question marks that we had coming into this season. Could he play a competent shortstop? How have you felt about his defense this year?
I think he's been fine defensively. Like, I don't think he's an elite defensive shortstop where he's making every single play, but I think for the most part, he's been making all the routine plays. He's been solid. I think he got off to kind of a rough start in the first month or two of the season, and I think that kind of has affected the metrics like as it should. I mean, but I think since then, I think the last few months he's actually been really solid. I think we've kind of seen improved defense from him. So I think the bat and the foot speed is dynamic enough that you can make up for maybe, him being an average defender.
Yeah, you mentioned the age. I mean, he's 29 now, just turned 29 in June, so he'll be 30 a couple months into the next season. Obviously, the trend now is long-term deals, so we're not talking about a 4-year deal. We're probably talking about an 8-year deal, more likely for a guy like Trey. And, I mean, you touched on it. The biggest question for me is the speed. What does Trey Turner become if the speed goes from the best speed in the league, as I said, fourth in stolen bases, sprint speed in like the 99th percentile, to above average speed? You look at the batting average, you look at the hits, those are the two categories he is highest ranked, and both of those are heavily influenced by the fact that once every couple games he's hitting a grounder to third base and beating it out. So when that's not the case, and Trey Turner goes from being a 305 hitter to a 285 hitter, like, what do you have in Trey Turner, and is he worth $35 million a year at that point in his career? Because, look, the power, 20 home runs this year, but again, you would expect those numbers aren't going to go up. They're going to go down or stay the same. And so do you want to pay $35 million to an average defensive shortstop who's hitting 285 4 years from now with 18 to 20 home runs? I think it's a fair question. Now, could Trey Turner maintain elite speed for the next 6 years? Definitely possible. Like, it's not impossible. There's better science and technology than there has ever been. But the one other thing that we haven't touched on that I think matters, the Dodgers desperately need a shortstop. As you said, they're in win now mode. When you talk about other positions, there are guys where it's like, well, we could throw Outman in the outfield, probably be okay. You could put Miguel Vargas in some of these infield positions and probably be okay. There's not a shortstop. Jacob Amaya had a great start to the season, was never expected to be much of a hitter, and has regressed in the second half of the season, although I think the last couple of weeks he's hit well. But there's not another short. The Dodgers need to find a solution at shortstop. So I guess for me, it's if you're going to pay one of the four guys on this list $28 to $35 million a year, I think I'm with you. Admittedly, I haven't watched a ton of Xander Bogaerts. Dansby Swanson feels like, I don't know how sustainable that is. Trey Turner at least has done this for 4 years. So I think I like him the best of the bunch, and I think they need to sign a shortstop. So for me, I would spend my money at shortstop and save money in center field, for example, and use that money elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Like, if you're not re-signing Trey Turner, who's going to play shortstop? If you're only looking inside the organization, like, I don't think Gavin Lux is trustworthy enough to be an everyday shortstop. I think he's an everyday player. I think he's fine at second base, but I personally, I do not want to see that defense at shortstop on an everyday basis. And I think Chris Taylor is fine there to play a couple times a week, but I also don't think he's an everyday shortstop. So I definitely think if you're not re-signing Trey Turner, you're going to have to look elsewhere on the free agent market or the trade market or whatever. So if you're going to, like you said, if you're going to be doing that, if you're willing to spend the money, why not spend a little more for Trey Turner, who has been great since you got him? He could play here. He's fit in the clubhouse. This team is on a historic run right now. Like, the chemistry is clearly there. And I think it would just be fun to be able to watch a top three of Mookie, Trey, Freddie for the next 5 years. Even if it means a couple bad years at the end. Like, I think, as we've been emphasizing, the Dodgers window is now. Like, if I'm completely fine with, I don't want to say going all in, but putting all your resources in there to maximize the roster for the next 2 or 3 years. And then after that, you could worry about that after.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers are set up to be able to endure a couple bad contracts. So you've got the David Price contract and the Trevor Bauer contract that they're getting literally nothing out of. And that's like $50 million worth of salary that is being spent on players. David Price has been fine, so there's probably some value he's adding. So I think the Dodgers are set up. I don't think there's going to be bad years at the end of Freddie Freeman's contract. Mookie Betts is a lot longer. So I think there's a potential for a couple years at the end of Mookie's that you don't love. But I'm with you. I don't think the Dodgers need to go all in. They're built to be sustainable. They're going to be as competitive 6-7 years from now as they are right now. But I would go for it. You need a shortstop. Pay the guy who's here. Pay the guy who fits in the clubhouse. You already know what it looks like in LA. You know what the cultural fit is. If he checks all those boxes, he's been fine defensively. He hits. He fits your lineup well. I think you just go for it. And so that's a shift. I mean, I was skeptical at the beginning of the year, but I think the fact that he stayed healthy, the fact that he has continued to hit and be successful, and the fact that he shows he can play an average. I mean, we were talking about Corey Seager. I don't think Trey Turner's a downgrade defensively from Corey Seager. If anything, maybe a slight upgrade this year. And so as long as he is average defensively, that's all we're looking for. That's all we need. I would just plug him right in and pay him the money. Now, could you get him for 5 years at like $42 million a year? That sounds better to me than 8 years at 35, but we'll see. The Dodgers will make it work. Will there be 4 teams bidding for these 4 guys? Or is one of these guys going to end up being a bargain because there's only 3 teams at the table and 4 players? So lots to sort out, but I think the headline for today is Trey Turner open to coming back to the Dodgers, has enjoyed his time there, obviously wants to be successful, and I think if you're the Dodgers, everything that you've wanted to see has come to fruition. You throw him the qualifying offer at the end of the year, and then see what happens, let it play out. Let us know what you think below. Are you willing to pay 8 years, $35 million a year for Trey, 8 years, $300 million for Trey Turner? Like, is that a number you're comfortable with? Let us know in the comments below. That's Daniel Starkand. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As always, thank you for joining us. Check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest. Please subscribe, ring the notification bell here as well. We'll see you next time.